Now, I wanted to ask what our drug regulation policy is for. And so we've got drug laws. And basically what these drug laws do, just in the most simplest terms, is in Canada, every treatment is illegal. That's the starting point. Whether it's a chemical treatment or whether it's a natural treatment, our drug policy makes everything illegal. And then the only treatments that you can have access to are treatments that the government grants permission to be on the market. So that's in the most basic terms, how our drug policy works, is everything's illegal and you can only have access to things that the government grants permission to be on the market. And then we've got Health Canada and the police and the courts to enforce this, to make sure that you don't have access to anything that the government doesn't want you to have access to. And so my question is, just for the audience, is why do you think we do this? What's the end goal? I mean, is it good health outcomes? Is it to protect us? I'm just curious if anyone has any thoughts. Yes?
Protect the pharmaceutical industry.
Okay, so protect the pharmaceutical companies. Yes, okay. Any other thoughts?
Pretty much it.
That's pretty much it. Now, you know that if we just went out onto the street, though, right, and we asked the average person, we would actually get the average person telling us, oh, our drug laws are for our safety. Like, most people think that actually if Health Canada hasn't vetted something, that truly it shouldn't be on the market. I mean, I started my road, my journey with that belief. And it's funny the ways I've gotten educated. I was running a trial years ago where there was a Health Canada inspector on the stand, and I'm cross-examining this Health Canada inspector. And when you're a lawyer and you're cross-examining, you know where you want to go, and you're asking questions, to box them in so that they're going to have to give you that final point. And I hadn't got to the final point yet, and I asked this question of an inspector that I just assumed I was going to get a yes. And it was something like, well, the purpose of Health Canada is to protect the health of Canadians. And I'm expecting a yes. And this inspector says no. And so I kept asking questions. And the inspector explained to me quite correctly, and I no longer, now I understand, no, the purpose of Health Canada is not to protect the health of Canadians. It is to enforce the Food and Drug Act and regulations, the law. And that's actually true. Parliament's passed the Food and Drug Act, the government's passed regulations, drug regulations, and Health Canada is the administrative and enforcement arm. They're not there to protect your health. They are there to administer and enforce the law. So this inspector was actually just being honest. But you see, when I asked you guys, well, what are our drug laws for? I would protect pharmaceutical companies. But I saw surprised faces when I told that story about why Health Canada was there. So see, even people that are already skeptical, we still actually believe that maybe the bureaucracy is there to protect our health, right? No, it isn't. And our drug regulation policy, this model that we have where everything's illegal and we can only have access to what the government grants us permission to have, is actually designed to protect intellectual property rights. Full stop. It's all about money, and I'll explain to you how this works. The serious money in the sale of drugs is the sale of drugs to treat the symptoms of serious health conditions. Not cure, because we're not in a curing model. We're in an allopathic model where we treat symptoms, we don't actually cure illness. So in the chemical pharmaceutical model, I mean, a single drug can make hundreds and billions of dollars in profits. A single drug being used to treat symptoms of serious health conditions. And yearly in Canada, I mean, the amount of our public and private budgets that go into purchasing chemical pharmaceuticals is astronomical. It is astronomical. But how does this work where I'm telling you, well, the whole idea is to protect intellectual property rights? To get approval to treat a serious health condition in Canada, you have to go through a process that's called the New Drug Approval process. Now, it has been, I'm guessing, about 8 or 9 years since I've had an expert under oath explaining the cost of going through this process. But the last time I was present when an expert under oath, because different things are said when you're not under oath. But under oath, it was explained that, on average, it's $1 billion. Okay, let that sink in for a second. $1 billion. To go through the process to get permission to treat a serious health condition. It means that in your lifetime, you will never see a drug that does not have a patent and a long life on the patent left go through the process. Only patented drugs can afford to go through the process, because if you succeed, like not all drugs get through, but if you succeed and you have a patent, you can then charge exorbitant amounts. And I'll use Viagra as an example. Viagra goes through this new drug approval process. They have a long patent, and the cost of Viagra, there were news stories about how expensive it was because it became so popular. But once the patent ran off and anyone could sell sildenafil, that's just the generic name for Viagra, sildenafil, the price just dropped like a rock, because now all the generic manufacturers can sell it. So to recover the cost of going through the process, you have to have patent protection. And so, for example, I don't know who the oldest person is here, but there's nobody living in this room who has been alive when a natural health product has gone through the new drug approval process. Why? Because it never has for a serious condition. And it never will. You will never see a natural health product go through the new drug approval process for a serious health condition, because there's no intellectual property rights. You can't patent a natural health product. So if you got through the process, anyone could compete with you and make the product. You won't be able to sell it at a premium. So first of all, no natural health product company has the money to go through the process, but you would never even raise the venture capital because you don't have intellectual property rights. So I want to be perfectly clear. For serious health conditions, our law is basically written so that the effect is that it will never be legal in Canada to use a natural health product to treat a serious health condition. That's the fact. That's our law.
What's our tragedy?
Okay. Well, legal. You can't sell anything for a therapeutic purpose without Health Canada's permission. It's illegal. Now, wouldn't it be more honest if Parliament would amend the Food and Drug Act to say only products that had patent protection at the time they go through the new drug approval process can be used to treat serious health conditions, period, subsection 2, and for greater clarity, it is illegal in Canada to use a natural product to treat a serious health condition. If we amended the Food and Drug Act to say that, we would at least be honest, okay? But most people don't realize that our system is specifically designed to ensure that it is illegal to use anything that does not have patent protection when it goes through this process to treat a serious health condition. Now, which president was it? Was it Roosevelt or Eisenhower that warned the American people that nothing in politics happens by accident? I know it was one or the other. Is anyone, any history buffs here? It was either Roosevelt or Eisenhower, basically explained as they were leaving office, when they were warning about the military-industrial complex. Eisenhower. But that nothing in politics happens by accident. Our drug regime, we haven't stumbled into this by accident, it's by design. It's by design. So by design, Parliament and the bureaucracy has decided that we will never use natural products to treat serious health conditions. So, but now, this only works, though, if we have censorship. And let me explain why censorship is so important. So imagine we all come down, everyone in this room, with the same serious health condition. And we are suffering. We all go to our medical doctor, and the medical doctor says, hey, you've got this condition, and I'm going to prescribe to you this chemical pharmaceutical drug, and it will address the symptoms. Understand, you're never going to be healthy again, because this isn't going to cure you, but we'll manage the symptoms. So the issue now is how unwell you're going to be. And, oh, by the way, there's some side effects. some people die. Like one of the side effects is death, and there's some other serious ones. So some of us in this room won't survive, and some of us are going to have very serious side effects. But what would happen is if that's all the information we're given, is almost every single one of us will go to the pharmacist and will fulfill the prescription, and we will take that chemical drug for the rest of our lives. And while it's on patent protection, either us or our health plan is going to be paying, through the nose for it, and then once the patent protection wears off, we'll be paying less for it, but we'll take it for the rest of our lives. And you can see how, in that scenario, why the drugs that get through the process can make hundreds of billions of dollars, because you have a captive audience through the medical system. Now, that's with censorship. What if your doctor or some other credible source said to you, oh, well, yes, you can take this chemical pharmaceutical, but, oh, by the way, there's a natural product that actually works better. It's really cheap because there's no patent protection, and let's not even talk about side effects because it's a natural product. Like we're not dealing in the same category as novel chemical drugs. Well, what are we going to take? We're going to take the natural product. And then the model fails, because then we're not paying the high prices for this chemical pharmaceutical drug. The company does not recover its $1 billion and make a profit. And if that kept happening, pharmaceutical companies would stop going through the process. And do you know what would happen? Health Canada would shrink, because the fees charged to the pharmaceutical companies to go through this new drug approval process are astronomical. They also have to pay yearly licensing fees. They also have to pay site fees. And Health Canada charges so much to the pharmaceutical companies that actually those charges form a significant part of Health Canada's budget. Now, can you say conflict of interest? Of course it's a conflict of interest. So here we have bureaucrats in our drug approval process whose salaries depend on pharmaceutical companies getting through the process, and whose fees depend on censoring truthful health information from us. So that's our model. Now what's happening is Health Canada has said, we are going to change the way we're regulating natural health products. Right now, natural health products have their own set of regulations. And Health Canada is saying, we want to take natural health products, and we want to take non-prescription chemical drugs, and we want to regulate them together under the same set of regulations. Now, for those of you that have been in the health industry for a long time, you'll be going, wait a second, weren't we just there? And we were just there. So before 2004, we only had one set of regulations. And Health Canada was using the chemical drug regulations to drive natural health products off the market. And for those of you who were around in the industry in the 1990s, you'll remember there was a citizen rebellion. And the government had to back down. The Minister of Health, Alan Rock, actually held a press conference saying, we're backing down. We're not going ahead with some cost recovery regulations, and we're going to ask the Standing Committee of Health hold extensive consultations and tell us how to regulate natural health products. And that happened. It was the most extensive consultations in Canadian history. And what the consensus was is they said, do not regulate natural products the same way as chemical drugs. Don't do it. The risk profile is wrong, the approach is wrong, the way, the evidence that should be used is wrong. And whatever you do, don't impose the same standards of evidence. But we can deal with the fact that there's differences. One of their recommendations was, well, if you grant a license to a natural product, why don't you make it law that the manufacturer has to disclose the type of evidence that was used to support the claim? This is basically full disclosure. Instead of censorship, they were saying, make people disclose the basis of the license being granted. Actually provide Canadians with the information used. Now, Health Canada is wanting to basically go back to treating us the way we were. Now, the current regulations that we have are still problematic. Like some of you who have heard me lecture before will know I don't like our natural health product regulations. And that's because I think they're just too strict. Now, our product regulations require a manufacturer to do two things. And I'm going to game you here. I'll let you know I'm gaming you. You got to prove that your product is safe, and you have to prove that your product's effective. And some people, they go, you know, that actually sounds really reasonable, Mr. Buckley. Don't you want manufacturers to prove that a product is both safe and effective to Health Canada's satisfaction before it's sold? No, absolutely not. And I'll deal with the effectiveness later, but on the safety front, I actually think that in requiring manufacturers to go through this process, we're actually driving products off the market, we're forcing them to be dumbed down, and we've actually already cost lives with our regulations. Why do we need to prove safety? And let me just give you some context. So I had made a request several years ago under the Access of Information Act to Health Canada, and I said, will you please provide me with all the information you have showing that natural health products have caused any death? And I asked them to go all of Canadian history, back to 1867 when we became a nation. And they quickly got back to me and they said, well, we can't go back that far. We don't have rigorous records. But they said, we do have rigorous records since 1965. So in response to the thalidomide disaster, Canada imposed a very rigorous adverse reaction system. And they said, we've got really good records of any adverse reaction reported since 1965. And I said, fine, let's just go back to 1965. Do you know how many deaths they were able to point caused by natural health products? Zero. Okay, 0 deaths. Let's compare this with acetaminophen. That's just the generic name for Tylenol. Probably everyone in this room has acetaminophen in their house. Some people are shaking their heads, but most people will, and some people likely have it in their purse here. It's so common. Now, acetaminophen, if I have my stats right, on average in Canada, kills 1 person per million of the population per year. So there's 36 million of us. This year we should expect 36 deaths caused by acetaminophen. So if we were to take a 2-week use of acetaminophen, so just any 2 weeks this calendar year of Canadians using a single product, acetaminophen, that is more dangerous than all of the natural health products going back to 1965. It's not even in the same ballpark. And those of you who've heard me lecture, I mean, I love to use peanut butter as an example, because peanut butter kills people every year. And it kills some of the most vulnerable, like infants and toddlers, right? So peanut butter, a 1-year use of peanut butter in Canada is so much more dangerous than all of our natural health products. Everything you could buy in a health food store, everything used by natural health practitioners, going all the way back to 1965. Peanut butter is so statistically more dangerous that it's not even fair to compare them. And if I was to say to you, if Health Canada was to come to you and say, as a taxpayer, we need to set up a bureaucracy. We're going to spend billions of dollars, we're going to impose billions of dollars of cost on the peanut butter industry, but we need peanut butter manufacturers to prove that their product is safe before it's sold in the grocery stores. We'd say, are you nuts? No, we would. We'd say you're nuts. And it's not that we're discounting that people die from peanut butter, but it's just the deaths are so few. The deaths are so few that the cost isn't justified. And yet, you know, if we were to bring in 1,000 people off the street, I would have a heck of a time convincing them, well, it's crazy that you would have to prove a natural health product is safe before it can be sold. And yet, the risk comparison you can't even make. You know, the United States, they had a citizens' rebellion before ours, and Congress was forced to look into the exact same issue that our Parliament was: how should we regulate natural health products? Congress determined that they were so safe, first of all, let's class them as foods even though we're going to allow structure-function claims. Let's deem them by law to be safe. And in fact, their regulatory body cannot, by law, take them off the market unless they have evidence of harm. Now, isn't that interesting? So here, by law, they're deemed to be unsafe, and we have to prove that they're safe, and yet our biggest trading partner on the same products, they deem by law them to be safe. You don't have to prove that they're safe. And it's interesting, it is a belief problem. We have a belief problem here. And our laws reflect our beliefs. So our drug regulation laws are designed to protect intellectual property rights. That means that our government has a philosophical belief that protecting intellectual property rights is a higher priority than health outcomes. It's a fact. Now, when you have a drug regulation policy that basically deems all drugs illegal, whether they're natural or chemical, and only those that Health Canada grants permission to be on the market can be sold, what that tells us is first of all, Health Canada does not believe that you have the right to decide how you're going to treat yourself. Health Canada and the Parliament and the government clearly have a belief that you don't have the right to choose which treatments will be available. They have the absolute right. And more importantly, they believe that they have the absolute right to determine what information you can have access to. See, if you can't have access to truthful information, you can't make treatment decisions. Now, I believe in health freedom. And health freedom just simply is the belief that the individual has the right to decide how they're going to treat themselves. And why I believe in that is because our physical experience is totally personal. I don't care what your religious beliefs are or whether you don't have any religious beliefs, but I think everyone in this room will accept that you're having an experience through your body. I mean, if I had you come up here and put your hand on this table, and I took a 22-ounce framing hammer, and I swung down and I crushed your middle fingernail, you're going to pull your hand away, you're going to run to the bathroom and run it under cold water, you're going to take something for the pain, you're going to go get it bandaged. You're going to be making all of those decisions. And if I told you you didn't have the right to make those decisions, you'd tell me where to go and why? Because you're having a personal experience. You're in extreme pain. I don't know if any of you that's happened to. I've crushed my fingernail with a framing hammer. I know how much it hurts. And so I'm just picking an example of immediate pain, but it's something that you experience. We're all going to die here. And before we die, most of us are going to have periods in our life where we suffer terribly. And probably most of in this room have already gone through some periods where we've really suffered terribly. And some of us will be suffering so badly that we'll actually have thoughts of ending our life. Whether they're serious thoughts or not, when you're suffering terribly, those types of things come to mind. And some of us in this room, we have big enough crowd that some people in this room likely will take their lives at some point because they're suffering too much. The suffering is yours personally. Health Canada, there's no Health Canada bureaucrat or there's no member of parliament that can experience your suffering. It's a personal thing, and that's why I believe in health freedom, because I actually think it's offensive. If I'm suffering, that Health Canada or anyone else could tell me that I can't try a treatment, that I can't have access to a treatment because they haven't approved it. And let me give you an example. And I like to use True Hope, and I know that I recognize some people in this room that they've heard this story before. But it's so powerful on the issue of health freedom. So for those of you who don't know about True Hope, they have a product to treat bipolar disorder called the Empower Plus. It's literally just vitamins and minerals. And the company was started by two men. One was a property manager, one was an animal nutritionist. The property manager's wife had bipolar disorder and she committed suicide. And two of his children had bipolar. His one daughter, Autumn, she was married and out of the house, and she was spending about half of each year involuntarily committed to a psychiatric ward. And so what would happen is her behaviors would just get out of control and she'd become suicidal. She would be involuntarily committed, and they would put her on a drug cocktail that would so dope her out that she couldn't function. And so she would have to stay in the hospital until she acclimatized enough to the drug that she wasn't like drooling on herself all day, just half the day. and you'd get sent home. Still couldn't care for yourself because you're so doped out. And then at home, as time went on, you become more and more acclimatized, so you're getting doped out less, and then the behaviors return, and then the suicidal behavior returns, and then she'd be involuntarily committed, and they would give her another drug cocktail that would dope her out, and it was kind of rinse and repeat. That was her life. So these two guys, they come up with this idea that nutrition could affect mental illness, and they just do research. What vitamins do you need? What minerals do you need for optimum mental health? They come up with 4 off-the-shelf products. They give them to one of the sons, and he gets well. They give them to Autumn, who I described for you. She gets well. Other people start coming to them because it's like, hey, these 2 people got well. What are you doing? Before long, they've got a single product, so that they have consistency. And they've got a whole bunch of people coming to them that they're managing. Now, the people that first came to them were like Autumn. They were the people that were in and out of psych wards, that the doctors on all of the Health Canada approved drugs, they couldn't function. And statistically, they would only have maximum 5 years to live before they'd kill themselves or the drugs would kill them. Like, these people were totally lost. The medical system was a dead end, and they were coming to these 2 men in this small company they formed. Well, they knew it wasn't approved. They knew there was no research. They knew they were the research. They were actually told, yeah, we'll share our product. You can do this, but you have to let us track your symptoms. We're learning. There was full disclosure. And these people, if the product works, like, you become well. These people were back to normal and basically only alive. True Hope ended up being charged. Health Canada just hated this product. The product is made in the US and shipped into Canada. And Health Canada, because they wouldn't stop selling, seized some shipments at the border and started turning shipments away, telling the border services, you turn these shipments away. And people became scared. And when I was interviewing these early people as potential witnesses, pretty well 100% of them said to me, do you know, Mr. Buckley, you haven't asked this question, but did you know I had a suicide plan? That I was healthy. Okay, so I'm making the suicide plan when I'm healthy, just like you or I. But I remember what it was like being in and out of the psych wards, being doped up, having no life, just the panic and the fear and the suicidal ideation. I wasn't willing to go back to that. So while I was still healthy, I was going to kill myself. So if I ran out of the product, I was going to kill myself before I got well. Could you imagine having been so sick that you would actually rather kill yourself? And you're not insane. You are completely competent and you're making a plan to kill yourself rather than go back to that. And here we have Health Canada denying the product because they didn't approve it. And they have doctors and they have psychiatrists begging them, you let this product across the border. They had Ron Lachenesse, who was the president of the Alberta branch of the Canadian Mental Health Association, holding public press conferences saying there's going to be suicides. You better let this product across the border. And then he started holding press conferences every time there was a suicide of a Canadian Mental Health Association member. I called him at the trial. He testified about the suicides. And the court acquitted True Hope, saying, you were breaking the law. You were selling without Health Canada approval, totally illegally. But I can't convict you because it was legally necessary for you to defy Health Canada so there wouldn't be more deaths. So, but Health Canada, and this was the trial where the Health Canada inspector wouldn't agree with me that Health Canada was there to protect your health. They're there to enforce the law, and they were breaking the law. Now, at that trial, I called a psychiatrist as a witness. I had to subpoena him. There had to be a court order to get this guy on the stand. He teaches psychiatry at Harvard Medical School in Boston, and he's an expert in chemical pharmaceutical drugs. So he actually was the founding editor and the editor for the first 10 years of the Journal of Child and Adolescent Psychopharmacology, which is a journal that publishes research on using chemical pharmaceutical drugs to treat mental illness in children and adolescents. He is an expert in using the chemical pharmaceutical drugs, but he's also an expert in Empower Plus because reluctantly one of his patients got on it and got well, and then he let another patient who he just simply couldn't manage at all on the drug cocktails, and she got well, and then he started allowing other patients, giving them the option, and before he knew it, half of his patients were on Empower Plus, and he was an expert. So I asked him on the stand, I actually have to tell you a funny story. So I asked him on the stand, if you got bipolar disorder, what would you do? And that's a totally improper question, like in a court. And the Crown didn't object. But the judge stopped me and said, Mr. Brown, who was the Crown, like, are you going to object to this question? And the Crown stands up and says, well, I could, but I actually kind of want to know the answer. And the judge said, I do too. So then, with that interruption, I got to ask the question again. And I'm going to read to you. This is from the transcript, word for word, my question and his answer. And this speaks to health freedom. This speaks to health freedom. So this was the question to the psychiatrist. Okay, so you can't tell us what you would choose for a patient, but I'm going to ask you. If you came down with bipolar, what would you do after you got over your panic? Question. And the reaction to your question, I actually probably would choose Empower. I know the trials aren't there, but I've seen it. And I think, given the choice between committing myself to a lifetime of lesser stability and mental fogging, I would first want to try Empower Plus. Now, when he says, I know the trials aren't there, he's talking about the double-blind clinical trials that you need to get drug approval. This is a drug approval expert. He's a journal editor. He publishes research. And he's saying, I know the trials aren't there. I know there's no way they'll get government approval. But I've seen it. He's seen it in his patients. He's seen lives turned around. This is anecdotal evidence that the government says you and I can't rely on and that nobody can be told about. So he's saying, I know the trials aren't there, but I've seen it. And rather than committing myself to a lifetime of lesser stability, remember I gave you that hypothetical, we have a serious condition and we'll never be well again? That's people with bipolar on the approved medications. So rather than committing myself to a lifetime of lesser stability and mental fogging, if you read the whole transcript, he made a point of saying, when these patients got well on Empower Plus, 100% of them sat me down and explained to me how much of a mental fog they were in under the chemical pharmaceuticals and just how amazing it is to be able to think without the fog. And he says psychiatrists have dramatically underestimated just how much of a fog, how much of a push down the approved drugs are. Now, this is health freedom. I'm not opposed to the government approving drugs. And, I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was, if not this health show, I think it was Total Health, skeptics groups used to come and try and interrupt my lectures. And one of them, is asking questions like, surely to goodness, nobody should be allowed to take a drug that Health Canada hasn't approved. There are people out there that think you should only take drugs that Health Canada's approved. Well, you know what? Great. If they don't want to take a drug Health Canada hasn't approved, they don't have to. Where I part ways with them is where they think they have the right to tell me that I can't take something that Health Canada hasn't approved because nobody has the right. Just like, if I smash your hand with a hammer, I don't have the right to tell you you can't go run it under cold water. Let's just wait for that phone to be turned off.
All right, I'm trying to turn it off.
Yep. Thanks. So, now, do you know that it is, I've read you this, question and answer, this psychiatrist. Did you know it's illegal for the company True Hope to share that with you? It's actually against the law. True Hope could not, give you a copy of that transcript because it would be to promote the sale of their product. So it would be making a health claim that isn't allowed. There's about I haven't checked, but there's about 40 peer-reviewed research publications on eMpower Plus. And it's all government funded, and not just in Canada. I think there's 3 or 4 different countries where the governments have sponsored research into this product. It's illegal for True Hope to share with you that research. Isn't that amazing? So we're talking peer-reviewed research in mainstream journals, like, the Journal of Psychiatry, the most blue-chip, psychiatric journal in the world. It's illegal for the company to share with you peer-reviewed, published research. They will get shut down and punished if they do it, because it's not approved for that use. You can't be told. And there's a health consequence to this censorship. So imagine you've got, most of you in this room probably have kids. So let's say you have a child, and just so the hypothetical isn't so traumatic, it's an adult child. So you have an adult child, and your adult child comes down with bipolar, and it's a bad case. So it's like, autumn, in and out of the psych wards. And the doctor sits you down and he says, those periods where your child's, getting, used to the chemical cocktail, and they're kind of back. They're kind of, before the symptoms really return and become suicide, they're kind of back. Those narrow windows of time that you get maybe twice a year? Cherish that time. Because your child's just not going to be here in a couple of years, like just statistically. And you're now broken. Like, what do I do? And you go into the health food store, because eMpower Plus is sold in the health food store. But the bottle's only allowed to say what Health Canada says it can say. And you know what it says? Supports mental health and well-being. Oh, wow. So you pick up that bottle and you see supports mental health and well-being, you set it back down. And you go on your way. And you have no idea. You have no idea that that might be the thing that saves your child. And this... It basically, if I remember, the claim is it's, supports mental health and well-being. That doesn't tell you anything. That doesn't tell you anything. But that's all they're legally allowed to tell you. And my point is this basically leads to poor health outcomes. How can we pretend this is good for us? How can we pretend that censorship is good for us? How can we make health decisions if companies are not allowed to share truthful information with us when, the Standing Committee of Health thought, well, actually, it should be the law that you have to tell us what the research is. But we have censorship, and this is not positive. Now, one of the big changes coming was, so remember I told you, Health Canada is saying, we're going to treat natural health products and non-prescription chemical drugs under the same regulations. And there's going to be 2 changes which will affect censorship. So right now, under our natural health product regulations, there actually isn't a limit on the type of health claims that natural products could make. Now, Health Canada has limited the claims to basically structure function claims like supports mental health and well-being. But there are some treatment claims out there. Under this new proposal, they're making it clear, no, it's only going to be claims like supports mental health and well-being. And in fact, if it is a condition for which you would, go to a health practitioner for, so, and not just a medical doctor, but, a nurse or a naturopath or a homeopathic doctor, if it's a condition that you could go, you would go and seek the advice of a medical practitioner, then no, you're in this new drug submission process. It's not a self-care product. So what they're going to call these products now are not natural health products, not non-prescription products. They're all going to be called self-care products. And that's so that you and I will feel good about the transition. Oh, we're not talking about chemical drugs. This is a self-care product. They've come up with a soft name. But self-care products, the claims are going to be limited even more than they already are. And then Health Canada is saying, well, and we also want to come in with what's called administrative penalties. And we think that these are important so that we can prevent people from making illegal claims, i.e. sharing with you truthful health information. So right now, if you're making illegal claims and you're ignoring Health Canada's angry enforcement letters like stop or we're going to go after you, they actually have to charge you. And that is a net drain for them. Because their budget, they're paying their inspectors, and their inspectors have to, put a case together and then, go to court. And it's actually a drain on their budget. But administrative penalties, they basically just write you a ticket. You never go to court. You don't get due process. You just owe Her Majesty the money that they levy. So now actually going after you for censorship pays their wage. So administrative penalties, bureaucracies love them because whenever administrative penalties are given to a bureaucracy, the enforcement arm of the bureaucracy grows 100% of the time because they actually use the tickets to pay their salary, and then they can hire more people. So now you're a company, instead of getting a letter and are they going to take me to court, are they not? They just basically, here's a ticket for $1,000. Here's a ticket for $1,000. Every day they can just keep fining you and just crushing you. So that's one of the mechanisms that they're going to bring in for censorship. Now, this is being done, according to Health Canada, to protect your health, because obviously we can't have you getting truthful health information. But they also want to harmonize the standards of evidence. So right now, for example, under our natural health product regulations, you can use traditional evidence to support a claim. So let's say, for example, scurvy became a problem again. You guys remember what scurvy is? Like back when the ships were crossing the ocean, sailors and people were dying because they weren't getting enough vitamin C, and they didn't know that's what it was. But just trial and error, the British Navy found that if they fed their sailors limes, that they wouldn't get scurvy, and hence British sailors were called limeys because they're eating all these limes. Now, for whatever reason, let's just say scurvy became a problem again, and we all got together and formed a natural health product company, and we came up with a lime extract that was going to treat scurvy. Well, we would never get through the new drug approval process because we wouldn't be able to raise the money to do that. We'd never get through the process. We wouldn't have the money. So a pharmaceutical company could come up with a patented chemical that would treat the symptoms of scurvy and get through the process, and that would be the only drug available, except right now under our natural health product regulations, you can use traditional evidence. So we could actually use the British Navy records and traditional references to show that limes treat scurvy and get approval. But they're going to repeal those regulations and basically say, no, if it's anything serious, you're going to have to go through this new drug approval process. So we're basically tightening the screws, but this is being done for your safety. Okay, it's being done for your safety. And Health Canada's actually, and this is Orwellian, is they've come up with this meme of failed efficacy. So what they're saying is one of the dangers of natural health products is that people might take them and delay using the approved chemical pharmaceuticals that work. And so you see the risk of failed efficacy. So the natural health product isn't going to work. That's the presumption. So failed efficacy, you're going to delay treatment and you could hurt yourself or die. And this really makes me angry because, George Orwell, 1984, where, basically you say the opposite. Our drug approval process is such a farce that literally I would say as an adult, you are incompetent to manage your affairs if you believe that when Health Canada says a drug works, that it works. So, and let me just explain to you why I just think it's madness, because it's total madness. To get, final approval through this new drug approval process, the last thing you have to do is provide Health Canada with 2 double-blind clinical trials of a sizable nature that show that your product works. Better than the sugar pill, right? Because double-blind, so nobody knows whether you're taking a sugar pill or the drug. Well, the company could run 100 trials and 98 show that it doesn't work, but as long as 2 show it works, that's what they give to the government. Oh, I see some surprised faces. In fact, I was surprised when I learned this, because you can't find a paper, or a regulation that says this is how it works. I was actually cross-examining an expert that Health Canada had hired. This was a private psychiatrist that ran a company that got psychiatric drugs through this process, including designing and running double-blind clinical trials, and primarily for antidepressants. And I'm cross-examining this psychiatrist, this hired gun, and he actually starts complaining, saying, you know, it's just so hard to get a double-blind clinical trial on an antidepressant, like to succeed, that we actually run 8. We're not going to run less than 8. So you hire our company to get an antidepressant approved, we're going to run 8 clinical trials. We might run more, but on average, if we run 8, we'll get 2 that show that it works. We'll show 6 that don't show it works, or show that the sugar pill works better. But we'll get, on average, if we run 8, we'll get 2 that works. Now, isn't this horrifying you? It should horrify you, because if you have 6 studies, either showing that it doesn't discriminate, the sugar pill works as well as the drug, or the sugar pill works better, but 2 of 8 show, you know, and it's just a statistical separation. Like, there's actually formulas that they use. But 2 that show, you know, the drug statistically works better than the sugar pill, and that gets approved as working, even, you know, and allowed onto the market with all side effects and the whole thing. It is an absolute farce. But, you know, we could cure this simply. If the purpose of our drug regulations was actually to make sure that only drugs that were effective got on the market, you know how we could cure this? Health Canada could change their policy. Oh, don't give us 2 double-blind clinical trials. Here's our estimate of what it's going to cost to run 2 double-blind clinical trials on your product. You give us the money. We will hire 2 independent groups. You won't know who they are. And we in those groups will design the trials. You don't get to design them to game it. And, you know, you've already run your clinical trials. You know that it's going to come back and show that it works. But you see, if we wanted good health outcomes, that's what we'd do, isn't it? Well, fine, give us the money for 3, 2 out of 3. You know? Then we would have good health outcomes. And, you know, the crazy thing also is let's say you have a chemical drug that actually does work, but it's got a whole bunch of side effects. If we wanted good health outcomes, the regulatory body would also go, well, you know, we've already got 5 approved drugs for that. Before we approve yours, let's run a study to see whether yours works any better than the others. Because what if your side effects are more serious than the other side effects? We shouldn't let it on the market then, should we? If the object is good health outcomes, there's never any comparative studies required. So the whole thing is absolutely a farce. It's just absolutely a farce. Let me talk about some of the other changes that are coming, because we're going to lose access. So remember I told you how Health Canada's budget depends on fees charged to the pharmaceutical companies? They've never charged fees on natural companies. They threatened it and actually came out with a fee structure. This is probably about 8, 9 years ago, and the industry went crazy. Like, I actually had medium-sized companies making it clear to me, we'll go out of business if this fee structure is imposed. But Health Canada is saying, you know, when we harmonize, we can't not charge the natural companies the same process, you know, the same fees that we're charging the chemical companies. So they're making it clear we're going to have cost recovery. We're going to be having these administrative penalties, not just for censorship, but for any violation. And so what we're going to have is we're going to have increased inspections, and we're going to have, every time there's an inspection, you find 1 or 2 violations. It's just like, I don't know if anyone here has been audited by Revenue Canada. I know I have. It doesn't happen without them finding a problem and you getting fined. It just, you know, it doesn't, even if it's just a minor thing, right? I got audited and they said, we owe you money. And I got fined for a couple of things. It was a beautiful experience in every way. So I tried to say that with a straight face. Another thing that's coming down the pipe is, remember in 2008, Bill C-51, it was an act to amend the Food and Drug Act, and they were going to dramatically increase penalties and also dramatically increase Health Canada's powers. And so from a penalty perspective, right now, if you're a natural health product company and Health Canada tells you to do something that would be dangerous and you defy them, the maximum fine is $5,000. But for chemical pharmaceutical companies, it's $5 million a day for every day that you're in violation. Now, this is a big difference. Now, if you're Bayer or Pfizer, $5 million a day is nothing. Like, it's nothing. But if you, I don't know of a natural health product company that could survive that. Now, we all fought against Bill C-51, and the government backed down. But the powers and the penalties are now in the Food and Drug Act, only they don't apply to natural health products. And they came in through Vanessa's law, which most people supported because Vanessa's law actually was very positive. It was going to require disclosure of clinical evidence things and to the public and things like that. But it brought in these powers, but they don't apply to natural health products. But with the changes, Health Canada is saying, well, we want to make these powers apply to natural health products. So we're going to find ourselves in a situation where nobody will be able to defy Health Canada. You know, we just had Dr. Rona here speaking before me, and I remember when Health Canada was taking natokinase off the market, he was a vocal critic. Now, do you guys remember any natokinase? Okay, so natokinase is an enzyme made from soy, and it acts as a blood thinner. And many doctors, such as Dr. Rona, I'm talking medical doctors, were safely managing patients with natokinase because it doesn't have the side effects that the chemical pharmaceuticals do. And at the exact same time that doctors, emergency room doctors, were complaining in the media about deaths caused by the new blood thinner Pradaxa. So what would happen is that people would show up at the emergency department, their blood was too thin, so they were bleeding out, and there was no antidote. Like if you were just on warfarin, rat poison, which is a mainstream blood thinner, if you show up at the hospital and you're bleeding out, they give you an injection of vitamin K, and that stops the problem. They couldn't do that with Pradaxa. Now they have an antidote. But at the time Health Canada took natokinase off the market, was at the exact same time that people were dying of Pradaxa. And I was acting for a company, and Health Canada was demanding that every company that had natokinase on the market do a full recall. And what this company did under my direction was we hired a medical doctor to do a risk analysis. And the doctor said, you can't pull this off the market. You have to give people enough time to adjust. So what the company did is we told Health Canada, well, we're going to stop selling, but we're not going to withdraw from the health food stores. And they published and had the health food stores let all the customers know you can order from other companies in the United States as a way of transitioning. But they were the only company that defied Health Canada. But under these changes, I would have to tell the company there's nothing you can do. Because if you're going to be facing $5 million fines, not just for the company, but also every director and officer involved in that decision, who can withstand that? Right? So we're entering a situation where they're just simply going to have too much power. And so these changes are coming down the pipe. Sadly, these changes are not we're not going to have much notice. So under Bill C-51, it was a bill in Parliament. It has to go through first reading, it has to go through second reading, it has to go to committee, it has to come back for third reading, and then the same thing happens in the Senate. We all had lots of time to respond. But these changes are going to happen by regulation. And so all the government has to do is publish the changes in the Canada Gazette, which is basically the Canadian newspaper, the government's newspaper, wait for an unspecified amount of time for comment. It can be as short as 2 weeks. Republish them, and then their law. We'll have almost zero time to respond. And so I'm asking everyone in this room, if you are not on the NHPPA mailing list. NHPPA is just a nonprofit organization that I'm part of that is here to try and protect our access. We want you to get on our mailing list, and Julia at the back there, you can give her your email address and we'll add you. And it's just because we're going to be coming out with some action plans. So another gentleman, Dean Parks, has done an Access to Information Act request to find out who was behind these changes and how Health Canada came to arrive at this. And we're going to be publishing a discussion paper about that, but then we're also going to be drafting a piece of legislation to solve part of the problem. And once we kind of do a call to action, we're going to need people to respond. And if you're not on our list, we can't get you to respond. And then we'll also ask, whenever we do ask you to do something, that you also involve your network so that it gets networked. So I see by the clock on the wall that it's 4:16, so I should stop. We do have another speaker coming into this room in 15 minutes. So until that person's not here, so I'm going to keep taking things. Now we've prepared a discussion paper that outlines these upcoming changes, and there's a stack of them on that back chair there. I will take questions if you want until somebody shows up, and then, if we get kicked out of the room, we'll just go outside and continue our dialogue. So you had a question at the front.
How is all this connected to the new Marijuana Cannabis Act?
Okay, so the question was, how is this connected to the new Marijuana Cannabis Act? And I actually think there is not a connection.
So they're not going to be regulating what's going on in the cannabis industry?
Well, now, no, they're not going to be changing regulation of the cannabis industry by this. So, I mean, we're...
But are they going to be subject to the Health Canada Act?
Yes and no. So for example, things that they're allowing now, such as CBD oil, will be regulated as self-care products. And so, any cannabis products that will be allowed to make the milquetoast therapeutic claims will be subject to this self-care framework. And if they're going to make a serious health claim, they have to go through the new drug approval process, which we won't see for something that anyone can make. So it'll have to be something tweaked so that there's patent protection, right?
Apparently 200 active ingredients in the cannabis plant.
Oh, listen, the number of cannabinoids and terpenes in cannabis, I mean, it is a miracle plant, and I think, as research goes forward, we're going to be really surprised by the health benefits.
Is this act going to prevent it from being utilized by the public and by the industry? Speak louder, please.
Oh, yeah, okay. So you mean this guy speak louder? Oh, and me. Okay, I'll speak louder. Okay. So, any other questions? So that was a cannabis. Yes, you had a question.
Can you make censored information on a membership password-protected website?
Okay, can you say that again?
Can you make censored information available on a membership password-protected website?
Okay, so the question is, and it's a question really about how to structure getting around the censorship. And the question is, well, if it was a membership-protected website, can you share information? And I would say no. So, let's just use True Hope as an example. So let's say they had a public website that said supports mental health and well-being, and they had another, website that you had to have a password to get in. No, because Health Canada would still say you are sharing information that isn't allowed to promote the use of your product for a purpose that isn't allowed.
What if you hosted it offshore?
Well, it doesn't matter if you're gaming them. So for example, let's say you and I wanted to sell something that Health Canada didn't want to allow us to, but it's legal in the States. Well, if we formed a company, a shell company in the States to sell it, but we're marketing it in Canada, I think a court would say you're just gaming the system. You're Canadians, you're in Canada, and you're just trying to get around our drug laws, and we would be found liable. So, but a company in the States that had no connection with Canada, as long as they weren't actively marketing in Canada, can legally, sell to Canadians under our personal importation.
That's the way to do it then.
Well, yeah, but you can't. But it's not a Canadian company. Like if you're trying to game the law, a court's going to figure that out.
Right.
So,
Legally, yeah.
okay, question over here.
How can Canadians change the law so that natural products are food?
Okay, so the question was, how can Canadians change the law so that natural health products are food? And it's a great question because in the United States, dietary supplements are actually classed as food, not drug, even though they're allowed to make structure function therapeutic claims. It's a matter of public pressure. And I think, does everyone here know about the Charter of Health Freedom?
Yes.
Okay, well, if you don't, Google Charter of Health Freedom and you'll find the website. After Bill C-51, like groups from across Canada got together, like consumers, manufacturers, pressure groups. How do we solve this problem? Because we're always reacting. And the decision was Charter of Health Freedom, which is a standalone piece of legislation which basically entrenches our health freedom rights and takes the regulation of natural health products from Health Canada and puts it in the Ministry of Wellness. So, but that doesn't address whether it's a food or a drug. But I mean, really, it's just political pressure. I mean, a lot of people wanted third category before. You had a question? Is there other speaker here? I'll vacate outside. Okay, so we're going to move outside, and I'll continue to answer questions outside.